All right, so I think our other guest is having some technical difficulty, so I don't wanna hold it up too much, just in respect of everybody's time. I think they'll join shortly, and then we'll get them up here. But we could definitely get started with introductions because this is going to be a nice packed space full of lots of questions. So I guess to start, we have Matthew from Big Time. So Matthew, I know a lot of our community was there last time and already knows all about the awesome stuff you guys are doing. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about Big Time and yourself, and introduce the project?
Of course. It was an absolute pleasure being on here last time too. Um, so big time multiplayer RPG game. We're currently in our alpha, which is one of those stages I think we'll be talking about here next. And it's almost like a mixture between World of Warcraft and Diablo. And within big time, I am the guild manager. So for guilds or clans or large player communities that want to play together, I try and be their point of contact and answer their questions.
Awesome, awesome. And we also have Josh here from our team. Josh, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more for those who don't know you, and talk a little bit about what we've got going on with Satoshiverse for those who may not be familiar.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, my background is in the traditional AAA video gaming space. Worked at 2K Games on Civilization 5 and XCOM Enemy Unknown as a producer. Worked at Sega before that. And so just been, very excited since coming into the Web3 space to develop something here with these new technologies. And so with Satoshiverse, we're taking a new IP, working with Jose Delbo from the comic book angle, creating a more fast paced arcadey, just create a fun game that's a third person action RPG slash roguelike, and just battling through the outskirts to make your character more powerful. And then, obviously the big hook here for a lot of people is going to be the fact that, your drops, your items, your weapons, you'll be crafting and forging, some of your stuff onto the blockchain. So, obviously being able to take some of that stuff out into the secondary market. And then obviously another, well, not obvious, but a very big, interesting thing for me and for everybody here is also the idea of interoperability. So eventually bringing other content in and taking our content and bringing it out, and, with some other, awesome projects. So looking forward to doing that, getting out into the metaverse and keeping this train going.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. Spencer is going to be here helping me host on the Apollo account. Spencer, why don't you do a quick introduction to yourself, and then we can jump in. And when Fade and Arena makes it in here, we'll get them all introduced and get going with them as well.
Sure thing. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, my name is Spencer. I've been working with Apollo Entertainment now for probably a year and a half. Been in the NFT space since 2018. So really excited to be here, and I've been helping Apollo and Satoshiverse with business development and partnership development, kind of everything under that lens. But yeah, so why don't we start getting into our questions there while we wait for Thayton and Arena to join us. So the first question I'm going to open up to everyone, and why don't we start off with Josh for this one? How have you found the development process to be different in Web3 compared to the traditional gaming space?
Yeah, I mean, I traditionally my background is working at major publishers, so that for sure, from the start, is very different in that you're pitching your ideas to um, specific types of investors, and then getting the funding and moving forward and developing a game over a different period of time, and keeping it kind of behind closed doors. In the Web3 space, it operates a lot more like a Kickstarter. You create an interesting idea, you pitch it to your community, show a sample of your work. Ideally in this space, you have a docs team so your community can understand your background and capabilities to deliver on your promise. And then if all goes well in that early stage, you just transition into developing your product and delivering to your audience. But, obviously there's also some key differences here in that the Web3 space has the community investor aspects are quite different, and that you can transfer ownership of that initial commitment in the game. But yeah, I would say a big part of it is people are just involved earlier and really, I mean, our community, for those that want to be, at least in our case, they're really almost like quasi developers. At some point we're going to bring them in and they'll get to be involved in the final product. So looking forward to transitioning to that stage really soon.
Nice. Thank you. Matt, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I think the way he just described it in terms of fundraising, I think is substantially different. When you look at something like Red Dead Redemption as a game, they had a gigantic budget. It was something they could kind of work on exclusively, and for many, many years before they ultimately released it. But with Web3 projects, it's closer to an indie style game where, yeah, both the community and the development team knows they're probably going to release something before it's completely done and completely tested, and they're going to add features on progressively. So your timeline tends to be a little bit shorter. And then the fundraising, I guess, in cash and background is going to be a little bit different too, because you're not coming out of a big studios, you're doing it yourself. A lot of Web3 projects raised with things like coin sales or NFT sales, which is a pretty different model right off the bat, but it allows you to develop a good game and, like you said, crowdsource or crowdfund it, because your community is got a vested stake in making sure that you guys are successful too. So that's a pretty different method of coming up with the game.
Great. Then Nick, do you want to close us out on this one?
Yeah, I largely agree with Matt and Josh. I think that, I don't particularly, I haven't developed in the Web 2 space, but I think that, one of the things I've found interesting of the Web 3 space is this kind of financing component, right? Where you are delivering on promises that you made. And I think that as developers, pivoting is always something that you're thinking about. And sometimes you think about that a little bit more when there's already a full community with expectations, right? I think that, early indie studios developing their first game or their second game, in a series may not have the same sort of expectations for what that game's going to be or could be. And, you start down a path and you might change paths or whatnot. And so I think that, part of that is really being transparent with your community and really helping them understand that this is a collaborative process and that, at least in our case, we're trying to build the building blocks for that first, layer of being able to develop with our community and being able to take feedback and make this game particularly tailored to, the IP that we've been developing for 2 years. So I think that, there's that aspect of because you have a community so invested in an unfinished product, which is, I think, something unique to the Web3 space, you kind of have to really think about those expectations and what the community wants and what they're looking for out of this project as you're kind of trying to make it your own as well. So I think that's both a challenge and an opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. And then I think our last speaker just got here.
Yes, it looks like we've got Vicky here from Phaeton Arena. So, Vicky, can you hear us okay? You might be muted, so you might have to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And thank you for joining us so late. I know it's late for you over there.
It's fine. I'm excited to talk with you guys.
Awesome. Can you? So we only went into the first question, and we'll give that same question to you as well. But why don't you give us a quick introduction and tell us a little bit more about Phaeton Arena?
Hi everyone. As you guys know, that Titan Arena is one of the biggest NFT play to earn at the moment in our Web3. At the moment, during our crypto downtrend, so the market cap quiet. However, our game still keep going and we have a lot of tournament, and our biggest score is reached to game as called I guess that's it.
All right, thank you. I think you might have cut out there briefly, so if that happens again, we'll let you know. But Spencer, I guess the question that Spencer asked before to everybody was kind of high level, kind of general. What have you found? What have you found different about developing a game in the Web3 space versus what you would find in the traditional space? What's been different for you guys at Dayton Arena?
For us, for development, the game in Web3 is more secure and provide a better experience in the term of ownership, customization, and trading, which Web2 at the moment has limitation.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that before you came in, we were talking about a little bit of, the different things. The ownership is such an important aspect, and developing specifically with that in mind, and the customization. I think Josh talked on that a little bit earlier, and not just customization, but interoperability and the ability to kind of have things be truly yours. So I think those are all, good points and interesting challenges that we all have to deal with. Spencer, why don't we jump back in, and we'll keep going.
Sure. Next one goes to everyone again. Let's start off with Matt. Big time for this one though. So what opportunities does having collectors and gamers involved early in the game testing process present?
I think there's an unprecedented level of cooperation between the community and the development team in Web3. So we talked just about how the fundraising process really ties your community together with like how you build the game. There's almost like not a parallel to that in most Web2 games. Certainly not the big ones, but Web3 kind of takes a lot of its identity from that relationship. The upside is you get to test through bugs in a pretty receptive audience. They generally understand where the team is at, and you can help work through things. But you can also get their feedback on what you want to do for major developments next. So like if for example you're debating like, hey, do we want to move to a different console, like PC versus mobile or something like that, or hey, should we do a new feature or a new storyline next? You can get a lot of that feedback directly from the people who would end up playing it too, and that's super useful because they're the ones who will ultimately end up engaging in that. um, I think that's probably the most important thing you get out of that dialogue.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it kind of feels like, you're able to kind of burst the bubble a little bit, right? The echo chamber becomes less echoey, I think, in the Web3 space, when, anytime you have an idea, you have that option of, getting your stakeholders involved and getting people's opinions who ultimately truly care about the game, and care enough to give thoughtful opinion. Because I think that's, again, so unique for indie studios, right? Is that you've got this community that, based on, NFTs they bought, or based on being part of the Discord, or based on just, really being excited about the game, they care, right? And they care before you've really done anything. And I think that's kind of cool, right? As developers, is it's not something you see often, that IP has a following without really, having done broader, more massive, production, right? You usually see that later in the stage of the company and the brand development. But here, even if it's a small group, and those groups, I think, scale to the sizes of different projects. But I think what all these projects have in common is that you have this core community who's been there, from a very early stage, probably before, I think in gaming projects, almost unilaterally, before an actual game was released, or at least the final version of the game was released. You have people who are putting time into being a member of the community, care about how the project's going to come out. And so to me, that's so interesting, right? Because you can kind of you kind of value those opinions a little bit differently when you know that the people who are giving them, they're not just bashing you on Reddit, right? They're not, making fun of a little aspect of the game. They really not just have a stake in how the game is going to turn out, but they care. Their heart is in it, and they've created this association with themselves and the IP or the game. And to me, that's like hands down the best part, is knowing other people care and they want to be involved and they want to be part of that equation.
Yeah, totally agreed. Especially because they've got some skin in the game too. So, if you just like kind of scroll through Reddit for like feedback on your game, you're gonna get some wild stuff, and it's generally things that people are feel very strongly, generally negatively. It doesn't really help you. You could be like, oh, okay, well, 100% people hate this game, but when you do have, through things like DAOs or those community engagement events, you can really get a feedback from things that they like and then how to sustain that stuff. So I know we've incorporated it quite a bit. It actually changed some of our timeline for after the global launch of the game about when we incorporate things like PvP. We actually bumped that up quite a bit earlier in our timeline, really because of that community feedback. So that's all comes from people who are either associated with Big Time or actively playing it right now.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's awesome. And I think that one of the things, I mean, I was so involved early in Decentraland, for example. And so kind of having Ari at the core of your team, I know he kind of has that mentality in terms of, seeing that project through and being involved in the early days there. And that was, I think that was the prototype, right, for community being part of the development of an unfinished thing that has kind of scaled over time. So seeing that now with a play and earn game has been, I know it's been an inspiration for us. I think it's really cool to see what you guys are doing and how you're incorporating feedback and kind of learning from some of the things that we'll talk about that may not have gone right, but also looking at some of the cool things that you and other projects are doing and starting to make these industry standards that make us unique and say, oh, wow, this works really well. Like, we're in a position where we can adopt these cool things for our community just like they are. And I think that's something cool for me as well, is like seeing other projects try things, right? Try things that other people haven't done before and see the results kind of in real time, and projects having I don't know, the risk tolerance to try new things that may not work, right? And I think getting that immediate feedback from people who care kind of lets you do that, right? Josh, I mean, you've been part of this from obviously from the production side of studios, who I think on that point probably wouldn't dare do a lot of the things that Web3 projects are comfortable with doing, just to try and fail. But what do you think? What do you think the opportunities that Web3 gives us are? You might still be muted, Josh.
Oh yeah, I am. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, getting people involved early on. A lot of the testing process, which is something we're going to start talking about, actually, is it gives us access to some of those things, and also I do want to make sure that people understand the difference between what quality assurance testing is and user play testing. It's something that we could take advantage of on both sides, but QA is just about getting it into people's hands and then finding the bugs, whereas play testing is more about quality and getting feedback from people and to help you to make a better game. But getting involved this early in the Web3 space, and having people who are not just giving you their money and then wait and see a few years later for when you develop a game. A lot of our community are genuinely here because they're excited about our IP, excited about playing video games. They want to play and earn, and I like the idea of us providing them the opportunity of getting involved, almost like they're actually working with us on the development side as part of that process. And so we can do things like user testing and QA testing in this space, early on. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we can get from our community, is just getting their feedback and putting things to a vote, and so there's some democratic elements to it. And I mean, I'll go into it a bit. I don't want to take up all the time right now to do it, but I would love to talk about what that process is from the design perspective and what that means, and not blindly taking all the feedback that comes your way. But I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, and I think one thing I was looking at Thetan Arena, and I think you have such an interesting perspective, because I was looking at some of the communities that you're targeting. You have a Brazil community, you have a Spanish speaking community, and you have a Philippines community. I'm sure with the connections to Binance, you're really focusing a lot on their reach, which is a little bit different, honestly, I think, than the communities we've seen in North America, South America, and a lot of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. So I'm curious what you've seen in terms of opportunities with this kind of feedback loop with your community. So what good things have resulted from being able to get your game out there early and have this massive community giving you feedback? Vicky, that one's for you. I'm not sure if you're muted still.
Oh, sorry.
No worries at all.
I was talking with my mic off. Yes, actually, this were insane for our during the alpha test and beta test, since we have a massive community and we have kind of like global. We have Spanish, Portuguese, Indonesia, Malaysia, France, UK, US. Like we have all over the world, and during that testing time, we have massive discussion, and we got really good feedback from that. I still remember our first alpha test worked up like really shortly, and we was only can apply for people who active in Discord and quickly register to participate on our alpha test. And this were only on like for almost let's remember, I think it was September 2021. It's like 10 a.m. UTC, 7 September. Is it? Yeah, I think so. I'm sorry. 25th September and finish at the 2nd October for alpha test. And people were like, why I couldn't get in? And they were like so excited and waiting for the beta test, and we were open really big, and we got like really good quantity of people who join our test, and we got a good feedback. And the most excited was our community. Like we had to open 2 global community, which is like because one group only can have 200,000 members, and we had to open the second one because it's always full.
Wow, that's awesome. No, I'm sure that was a crazy week with with releasing a game and then having that many people participate at such an early stage. And I think the global, you don't really have a choice but to release globally in this space, because of the nature, I think, of how a lot of these projects are distributed with their holders and the people that are interested. And so cool that you've had kind of the product of a year's worth of experience. So I know a lot of these questions that we're going to be asking a little bit later are going to be, you guys are going to have a unique perspective on that, given the size and range of your community. I think that's really cool.
Great. So yeah, next question I'm gonna direct directly to Josh. So I'm wondering how much of an impact does user feedback have on the development of the game? What scale that impact is?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start off first, and I want to just apologize. It's going to sound like I'm name dropping, but it's totally relevant um, to this question and to playtesting and what's important when you're designing something new and you want something that surprises people and that's something that's unexpected. And so all the way back in 2008, while I was working at Sega, I was a producer on a game, it was Monkey Ball, and we developed one of the first games on Apple's new technology at the time, which was the release of the iPhone. And so being that early, I had the honor of working directly with Steve Jobs and presenting our game at the WWDC conference. And something that he conveyed that always stuck with me as a designer is that you can't just, a lot of people think, to give the customers what they want. People say, I want, X, and so you develop X and you give it to him. And his idea, his approach was more that it was to try to figure out what people want before they know what they want. And then there was this Henry Ford quote about, like if you ask customers what they wanted, they would have told me, I want a faster horse, right? Because at the time they didn't have cars. So people were riding horses and they want a faster horse. So the point is that people don't always know what they want until you show it to them. And so when you're developing a game, I think it's still good to have that perspective. It's definitely important to do market research and get user testing and player feedback. And I definitely like to do that. But I think, a lot of people assume that you just you do a test, you show people your game, they play your game, they give you the feedback, and then, you make the changes based on what they say, and that's it. And so in my career, I never did that. I working with Firaxis, we never did that. They were considered one of the top developers in the space. And you really need to take all the feedback in just as data, but you still need to parse that data and take the quality feedback from that. That still shapes what you're doing on your own to deliver something unique to the customer. So in our case, I still want to get the community involved. I still want to get all of this feedback, but I also want to be upfront in saying that just because you say you want something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go in exactly like that. This is a kind of like a big system that we're developing, and at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the right incentives are in place to make it a successful, long-lasting game that we can transition into other features and to bringing in other ways to play, and so I think that impact of all of that data from all of those people giving all that feedback is still important, and at the end of the day will go a long way into helping us make something really great together.
Well, I think kind of playing off of what you're saying, Jobs and Ford said like they were at the cutting edge of new technology, right? And I think the salient part of that comment is that sometimes people don't know what they want because they're not in a position to know what they want, right? And I think that truly innovative companies can take that, right? They can say, okay, make me a faster horse, right? And translate into, no, what you really want is a car, right? Because the car isn't just a faster horse, it's a faster horse plus. And I think that, our perspective on feedback is, we have to find there's different categories of feedback, right? There's the things that can be implemented. We can go down different paths, and sometimes we'll pull the community to determine which path we go down, which is something Matt was talking to before. Sometimes the feedback is the we want the seed for an idea, right? And we get that seed from the community, and then we can make that idea our own based on our technical capabilities and kind of this broader vision that we have planned. And sometimes it's intentional decisions that fit as part of a bigger piece of the puzzle, right? So maybe something is in an early version of the game only implemented at a basic level, and we've got a long list of how that's going to be implemented in the future, but the feedback pertains to that early version. And I think, Josh, that's kind of pertains to your point, is sometimes it'll be good to get that feedback, because we'll know, okay, like this is kind of going down how we thought, it's not quite there yet, so it might reinforce our desire to add to it or change it, or continue to go down that path, right? But sometimes it might be that, wow, like people really don't like this, or they really do like this, so let's put additional focus into it. But like you said, there is a kind of a machine behind the development of these games, right? You've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 people working on these games all at the same time, every little component. And so implementing a change might be easy, it might be pivotal, it might be wanted, it might be unwanted. And so I think there's a certain level of, I think, trust and transparency that has to exist between the developers and the community, especially in these Web3 games, where the developers are seeking that input and getting those ideas and getting those seeds, but the community is giving the developers the benefit of the doubt that there is a broader plan, that there is a broader schema that's being implemented there.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine because you're in Web3 and these users are getting involved earlier in the development process than normally they would be in a more traditional game. You're probably more likely to get your feedback implemented into a game in a Web3 game than a traditional game. I don't know if that's true, but I would imagine that probably would be. I don't know if any of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that from a development perspective, and Josh probably could speak to that better as well, and Matt, you probably have some thoughts since you guys have actually been doing it. We've we've I've seen that ideas at earlier stages, there's different phases of development, right? So once you're kind of far down a path, there's a lot of resources that have been spent on going down that path. So yeah, I mean, if you get an idea at an earlier phase, there may still be a lot of flexibility with which path you go down from there. And I think, naturally that presents a better chance, obviously, of having that feedback implemented. But it could be the other thing, right? Where it's the feedback you receive is very relevant because something isn't quite ready yet, right? And it kind of aligns with your overall vision, even if it doesn't align with where the game is at in that early phase.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that statement that if you want to have your feedback get incorporated in a game, you got a much better shot with a Web3 game than you do with a Web 2.1, particularly a large Web 2.1.
Very cool. Thanks, guys. So next question I'm going to direct to Vicky at Thetan Arena. So you guys have already gone through a number of alpha and beta testing rounds. I was wondering if you could explain some of the biggest challenges that Thetan Arena faced as they were going through these testing rounds. Vicky, you might be muted.
Hi, sorry. Yes, so during our launching, so we will go through alpha and beta tests, and the most challenging for us is that is we have make a plenty reward for people challenge to find bug during it, and when during our beta test we have like a massive community, and it was like a time were extremely active. People will always discuss about the game, and that is really great feeling for us. The tester will help us improve a lot. The quality getting better.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's the key, right? Is responding to the challenges and kind of taking the feedback, even if it's negative, even if it's critical, and realizing that, again, well, kind of back to what I was saying before about getting out of the bubble, right? Sometimes everybody
Yeah,
loves what they're creating, right? But if people hate it, that's a good sign to hear that early, right? Versus late in the stage. And it's always good to have the good feedback, but sometimes the bad feedback is even more valuable.
yeah. And I really strongly believe is during our open beta periods, our game is bring people like a new gamer with a whole new taste of the gamer in the MFT late 2021 periods. So that time we have a ton of people who join in our test, and special when our work fund create a lot of reward for people to fight bugs. So I don't think we can forget about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Vicky. So next question is to Matt at Big Time. So you guys have been releasing early versions of the game to your collector community for a while now. What were some of the most important things you've learned from doing so?
I think for us, the major development that we found right off the bat was we had to improve the quality of life of like the player in it. So that took place in a couple things. One, we had to make the party finding in the in-game chat a lot easier. It was something that in testing we had used almost exclusively with Discord, incorporating that into the game, but we needed to bring that feature or more of those features into the actual game itself. And that additionally, the mini map, things like navigating the screen, and then ultimately, like most recently, with the end of like player stats at the end of each level was super important. So like when you complete a dungeon, you can get a breakdown of all of your stats. All of those things don't really affect the gameplay. They're not really like additional content for users to play through, but people really value their ability to find other players and to have like an easy to use experience. I think that was some of the most valuable stuff that changed between what we could test internally versus bringing it to our
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, Matt. We've kind of been thinking about this. We haven't released our first alpha yet, but one of the things that we're thinking about is, how much should we develop the UI, ahead of time? And I think where we've kind of landed is we want to get as much in there as we can to kind of guide the gamer, even though it is an early phase, and even if it's not how it'll be implemented at a late phase, right? Maybe there's in-game UI that becomes out of game UI or is in the beginning out of game, and it becomes in game, and there's tutorials that may exist down the line and things like that. I think it just depends on which stage of development you're at. But I think that's a really good point. It's once people get into a game, they've got to have some way of actually knowing what you want them to do, right? Especially if you're trying to get feedback and get testing and quality assurance type of stuff. It's important, I think, to guide them and know what get that valuable feedback because they were actually able to go down the path. And I think sometimes, one thing I found as kind of from my perspective as a founder who's not as in the trenches in the nuanced game development is, I get our prototype every 2 weeks and get to play it, and now it's more frequent as we get closer to our alpha. And some of my feedback is, well, I understand that you guys all know how to do this, but I don't, and it may be that the person who's playing it for the first time doesn't. So this is a major challenge to me. And I think that for the team, that's been useful because we can kind of start through our internal testing, gauging what, are going to be some of those UI challenges. And, just like you said, making people's lives easier during those early phases where you're asking them to say, hey, it's not done yet, but come play our game, come give us feedback, help us identify issues and help us identify things that we can improve as we develop the game, rather than, all right, we've checked all the boxes, here's the game, hope you like it. And I think that, that's an important point.
Nice. And that actually, Nick, leads me into my next question for you. So you guys mentioned that you're going to be releasing the Alpha Satoshiverse within, in the very near future. So I was wondering, are you able to tell us what some of the plans are for playtesting, like the schedule, when that's supposed to begin, and how that's all going to look?
Yeah, so I mean, the game, we're kind of in I'd say the final phases of bug fixing, internal development, just making sure that, or sorry, internal testing, making sure that we can get a version, kind of with what Matt was saying, a version to the player base where, to our collectors, to our community, to really, for in this first phase for Legionnaire holders, that you're going to be able to interact with and get the overall vision and see what the basic game loop is. And so, our thought is, what we'd like to do is get this core game loop ready, have a version that, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be all sorts of things that aren't completed. And for us, that's kind of the point, right? We want to be early enough in the development phase that people aren't necessarily playing the game, they're testing the game, right? And they're testing the game because they care and have this opportunity to be part of the future development of the game. And so what we want to do is set up these mechanisms. So, we're going to have mechanisms for reporting bugs. We're going to have, there's going to be some prizes that make the game feel like you're still playing it, even though the full, play loop isn't going to be there in this, first alpha. But I think that the goal is to make sure that people who are playing it kind of have this twofold, at least in my mind, it's twofold. It's one, we want to give kind of the first glimpse into the vision, right? The overall direction we're going with this, to help people see what this could become. And, these types of things take a long time to develop, and we want to develop it right with time and get that feedback along the way. But that's kind of the second part, is other than showing people what we're building, I think the second part is truly to have feedback loops that we can, communicate with the community, get that feedback, fix bugs, identify things that we didn't even think of, because I'm sure there's going to be things like that, and have people actually get their hands on something and mess around with it and see, okay, like, we thought that people were going to use this one way, but they're using it a completely different way. Is that a good thing? Does that break the rest of the system? Does that kind of fold into the plans? And so I think there's going to be, these first versions of the game are going to be much simpler, right? Much earlier than experiences people have had in any other game they've played, right? Because it's not the typical time that developers would release the game. But that's going to make this kind of cool opportunity where we can really meaningfully engage with our community and have the mechanisms set up to do that, so that over the next 6 months, a year, 2 years, all these data points, all this feedback, all this, the back and forth with the community is kind of getting folded in at each phase of the game development. So we'll have kind of more detailed announcements in the next couple weeks about the specifics of all of that. But yeah, we're getting close. We'll probably do another prototype review in the next several weeks, and in that review, you'll kind of see the final version that we're working on for this. You'll see aspects of it, at least. We don't want to give away everything, but you'll see a lot more of where we're kind of at. We just put in a whole new UI system, kind of the points we were talking about before, to make the player's life easier and to kind of guide them down that path. And so there's been a lot of change and improvement in the last month. So I'm excited to get there and to see what people think.
Cool. So I think it's just about time to announce our giveaway. Nick, if you want to do that.
Yes. So just a reminder that every week we have these episodes, and every week we've been doing a prize for those who jump in and attend in person. This week's prize is one of our 8 Army avatars, which is one of our avatar collections. For those of you who don't know, and the winner of our 8 Army avatar for this week is Hamster Boss 4. It's a cool name. But Hamster Boss 4, if you could DM us either now or after the Twitter Spaces, we'll get you all sorted out with your new 8 Army avatar. But we'll be doing this every week, so make sure that you jump into these, and maybe next week it'll be you. But congratulations to Hamster Boss 4 on your new avatar.
Awesome. Congratulations. So we're at the top of the hour here, so we're going to have one last question I'm going to open up to everyone here. Sorry, Vicky, did you have something to share there?
I think she just said congratulations.
Okay, perfect. So last question, why don't we start it off with Josh here. How do you identify people to get involved in the early stages of user feedback?
I mean, in our case, it's going to be the people in the community. I mean, traditionally, you pay some sort of user testing house who's interviewing people, and people are coming in and getting paid to test things. They don't know what they're coming in to test, but in our case, we have people that that are here and available, and there is potentially some bias there, but it's just something that we'll have to work through. But I think people that show up in our Discord, express interest, engage with us. It could be people of all types, people with experience in developing games, people with experience in Web3, people who are just here as wanting to have fun. Maybe they discovered us through the IP at the Comic-Con or something like that. But at the end of the day, we value all different types of feedback, and so the best time to get it is now. And so we'll be doing that very soon, and reaching out to people in our communities and creating channels. I'll be jumping in there more often, just to chat with people whenever they want, and as we start this feedback loop with our community. But ultimately, it needs to be the people that actually care about your project, are willing to spend time in the project, and are willing to give constructive feedback. And so, one of the things that I've seen in this community in general is lots of positive people, people excited to see what's next. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to working with them.
Beautiful. Matt, is there anything you guys do differently at Big Time for identifying people to do testing?
I think the main thing we find is for guilds or DAOs that play the game in substantial amounts, we see if they're like a positive voice for Big Time, when we try and incorporate like their feedback on certain programs that we're rolling out. So when we make changes to like a guild program or ambassador things or like new content, we'll frequently reach out to them first, ask them to try it out, and give us their feedback. We tend to weight their feedback quite a bit as we either make refinements or as we launch the game. But really, if you're a positive player inside the game, we want to enable you and help you out more, especially as you find more people to play with.
Awesome. Vicky or Nick, anything else you guys have to add to that last question before we close out?
I defer to Vicky if she has anything, because I think Josh nailed it from our perspective. All right. Well, hearing nothing else, I think that I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for joining. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties at the beginning, but I really enjoyed this chat. I think this is a topic that I think project founders and teams and developers are really, it's a challenge and an opportunity, like I was saying before. It's something that we have been thinking about a lot and, planning for as we approach our alpha release. So I'm very thankful that we got to have Matt and Vicky as representatives of two just incredible projects that have been doing this, for a long time now and have, seen the challenges and grappled with them and also come up with some really unique solutions for them. So thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to everyone who joined today as a viewer and to everyone who isn't going to be able to make it but is going to listen to the recorded version. So hollering out to all of you guys as well, because I know there's a lot of you. Thank you so much to everyone who joined, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to do this and see what you guys are doing and continue building ourselves.
Thank you so much for hosting this thing. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you all.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for your invitation. It is my pleasure to be here chatting with you guys and fill out our communication. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks all. Good company.
It's well like 2 a.m. here, so I'm a little bit sleepy. But
no, we definitely appreciate it. Thank you so much for staying up late for us and joining this.
yeah, I'm really like this topic actually, and it's really remind me about one of the stages where we're doing one of the testing and collecting the feedback from the tester and find out all of the bug and fix the bug and the meeting, everything just go back to our mind. I think with me the best mechanics for getting the feedback from user who doing test game is like let people play and enjoy the game without giving too much information and to make sure that their feedback are real.
Yeah, I think that's true. Sometimes it's just you got to see it, you got to play it, and then people are going to have what they feel. So I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think that's wise advice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thanks for joining, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody, and hope that you all have a great rest of your week and weekends, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Nice
Bye
to
all.
see you guys.
Thanks. See you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.